Hello everyone, it's Micah, and we're up to bake number 6. And this is the third bake in a row that I did from Zoe Francois' Craftsy series on how to bake foundational recipes. The exact title of the series escapes me at the moment, but in my last 2 videos I went over the foundational recipes that she presented for biscuits and for muffins. And this one is a little bit different. It doesn't feel as much like a foundational recipe, but it's her example of a quick and easy dessert, and it's a 1 bowl chocolate cupcake dessert. And while I gave myself rave reviews for the muffins that I made in Bake 5, I managed to top myself in Bake 6 with these chocolate cupcakes. I'm really excited to show you what happened with this bake. So this is where this is my computer. That's actually the one I'm recording this video on right now. But this is where I had my recipe set up digitally from snipping it off of the course materials in the Craftsy series. So that's of no importance to anyone but me, but I did take a picture of it, and it's cogent to this bake. So I had this off to the side while I was doing most of my prep work. I made a major discovery during this bake. After going through 5 bakes, I realized that this pre-mise en place that I had invented hadn't been invented for a reason, because it is a time suck and it isn't efficient. And this is one of those things like where the memes have the nobody colon and then me doing all this pre-mise en place. There's no such thing, and like I said, there's a reason for that. This was the first bake that I really got into a groove with measuring out the ingredients, and I did all this in about 30 minutes. My speed was like double on this one what I had done before. I'm starting to understand how to just go to the cabinet, get the ingredient, measure it into the container, put it away, and get out the next ingredient or 2. So I only work with 1 or 2 ingredients out of the cabinet at a time, and that makes the process much quicker. Now, for some people, 30 minutes of prep to do this sounds ridiculous still, but I was at 90 minutes in earlier bakes because I was trying to be overly prepared and preparing for the preparation of the preparation. It was just a lot. But in this instance, I got it all out there like within about half an hour. And the other innovation that I had for this recipe was that I learned how to prep flour for sifting, which is you can actually measure the flour into 1 bowl, because you do not want to measure already sifted flour, because it can make a difference in how it weighs out. So what I did was I measured the flour into 1 bowl, and then I dumped it on top of the sifter in a bigger bowl. So now at this point it's not sifted, but it is measured out correctly, and all I have to do is take about 45 seconds with this type of sifter to sift out the flour here. So that was my other finding this time around. But you can see the baking pan prepared with the muffin cups. You've got the flour and the sugar and the cocoa powder and the smaller bits of ingredients, which I'm not going to pretend to know what it was after a week, but one of those is I think one of those, no, I didn't use the espresso powder with this, but anyway, I think that's baking soda and salt. Pretty sure that's what that is. And then there's vegetable oil, buttermilk, egg, and I want to say that's vanilla in the large measuring cup in front, but I don't know why I would put that. You don't measure vanilla into a cup that large, so I'm blanking on what that was. Let me go back to the recipe, see if I can blow this up and see what I'm missing here. Oh yeah, haha. How could I forget that? How could I forget that? That's rum in the large measuring cup. This recipe has hot coffee and rum in it. Now the coffee uh, is off to the side in the coffee maker, so I hadn't yet pulled that over into this photo. But this recipe has both coffee and rum in it, and that imparts a distinct flavor. Well, I use spice rum, so for me it imparted a distinct flavor, but it was very pleasant. But not I'm giving you spoilers at this point. So that was my prep. As you can see, like if you compare this to the photos of my MEP for the earlier bakes, you can see. I think you can. To me, I can see a greater sense of confidence and calm in how these things are laid out and presented. The other thing is that all of my implements, all of my tools are handy to me. They're on a baking rack right behind me from this perspective, so I can pull them out at any point with very little trouble. So I'm not being super obsessive about documenting each spatula and and grater and all the random little things that might be needed during the recipe. I can just get them if I need to, so I'm not being obsessive about that. So this was a really clean and quick MEP for me. So this is me sifting the cocoa and the baking soda into the flour, or I should say, I think this was probably all of the other dry ingredients, and sifting the cocoa and baking powder into that. And then this is as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a one bowl recipe, but one bowl is very misleading. For me, it's very misleading. It was presented as, and usually one bowl recipes are touted that way because look how easy and convenient this is. You don't have to. You can just dump everything in the same bowl and mix it together. But really, even recipes where you're keeping the things in two separate bowls and adding one to the other is really ultimately a one bowl recipe anyway. So I didn't necessarily find this recipe that much more convenient than doing something by the traditional creaming method. Creaming my butter and sugar together makes me feel like I'm really making a cake. And making a batter that's one bowl feels a lot more like making something from a cake mix. So I didn't feel quite as chefy with this one, but it definitely was from scratch. So this is me mixing all the dry ingredients together, and then this is after I had mixed all the wet ingredients. Now, I would have liked to have gotten a picture in between, but I thought I had done, well, you know what? I thought I had done something wrong. I probably needed to take a picture of what I thought I had done wrong, just for documentation purposes. But the recipe, as great as these recipes are, there was a flaw in this recipe. The hot coffee really serves to thin out the batter. It melts and unclumps everything in the recipe and loosens up the batter considerably. And if you watch, and when I'll rewatch the video that accompanies this recipe, she added all of the wet ingredients all at once. However, in the written recipe, it clearly says to add all of the wet ingredients together except for the coffee and the rum. And then after you've whisked together every other ingredient, then you add in the coffee and rum. When you withhold the coffee, and I don't know if the rum contributed or not, but when you withhold the coffee, it gets very thick and clumpy. The batter became very, very thick and clumpy. It was so thick, it was stuck in the whisk, and I was having a lot of trouble mixing it. And in the recipe, it says the batter should be very, very runny, should be very thin. And I was not getting that result, and I was panicking because I thought there's something wrong with this recipe. And I even started second guessing the measurements. Now, I knew I had measured out everything according to the recipe, but it only called for 1/3 of a cup of oil, which even now sort of is a head scratcher to me. I don't know how they came upon that ratio of oil, because usually you need more fat than that in a cake. So that's something I'm going to have to do some research on, how this cake works with so little shortening, or so little oil in this case. And so for a second, I considered adding oil to the recipe, adding even more oil, because there was only a third of a cup, and I've made cake recipes with a cup and a third of vegetable oil in them before. So I was thinking, well, maybe they left out the one. It should have been 1 1/3 cup of vegetable oil instead of a third of a cup. So I was on the verge of actually adding more oil and altering the recipe, when I thought, well, wait a minute. Let me go ahead and add the coffee and see how that. And I may have even gone back to the video of Zoe doing the recipe, but at any rate, I stopped myself from changing the ingredients, and I said, let me just add the coffee and the rum. Once I added the coffee and rum, the batter thinned out immensely. It wasn't quite what I would call really thin, which is what the recipe said it would be. So I was still worried that there was something wrong with the batter. But after all of that drama, this is the fully mixed batter. And then pouring it into a measuring cup for further pouring into the baking cups. So this was my unbaked batter in the cups. I think I did a really good job making what am I trying to say? Putting even amounts of batter into each cupcake, into each baking cup. So I was pretty impressed with that. These sort of mechanical things are usually not a strong point, but I'm trying to develop more confidence and trust myself more to do these things. And it turns out I'm not so bad at it. And I don't really know why I thought it would be good to show you the residue. Maybe, I don't know. Oh, I will say that, yeah, and this is my usual, look how much of a mess I made picture. I will say that there was a fair amount of batter left after I had done 12 cupcakes, and I think part of it might be the reason why the measurements didn't line up is because muffin pans tend to be different sizes. I think this one may have smaller, more shallow cups, so that because the muffins that I did in the last recipe also seemed a little small as far as I was concerned. It turned out fine in terms of the bake. It was just about the right amount of batter for the muffin bake, but there was too much batter for this one. So I actually, there's my cleanup. Okay, so now you can see this was the fully baked cupcakes. They baked really clean and pretty much within the parameters of the recipe baking time. So I was happy with that. As you can see, there was so much batter left over that I didn't want to just toss it out. So I used one of my mini tart pans and just poured the batter into that and baked the remainder of the batter in this tart shape. I still don't know how that came out. I think it might be because because the dimensions of it are different. It might have baked differently in the middle, but I still have that tart shaped cupcake in my freezer, and so I may thaw that out today and see like how it actually came out. And this was where I turned them upside down instead of fishing them out of the pan. I just inverted the rack over the cupcake pan and just turned them out like this, and that way I could just turn them over. And you can see the one cupcake has a different colored wrapper. I ran out of similar cupcake liners, and I had to go into the next color in the set. So that was what that was. And this is where I cut into the cupcake, and you can see the crumb of the cupcake. It's, again, like with the muffin, it's perfect. I think One thing I'll say about Zoe's recipes is that they do appear to be really well tested. The proportions seem to be on point, so that the consistency is well, just like what you see here. It's just as moist and delicious as it looks. And that rum, I used Captain Morgan's spiced rum, and I just love that flavor anyway. And there's just a kind of a hint of that spice in there, which is really, really nice with the coffee flavor. And so this is a virtual photo bomb. This is my new kitten, Cairo. And I didn't mean to, but I'm never going to not show a cat photo if it happens to appear in my photo roll. So this little Cairo. Maybe I should call him Cupcake. And then we could get really confusing, and then just as long as I don't accidentally bake him or eat him. I don't know, that was a weird Hansel and Gretel moment there. At any rate, the cupcakes turned out really nicely. And I realized in my past couple of videos I haven't been talking about the feedback that I got from other people. I've decided that maybe unless someone says something really pointed that I didn't, super useful and an observation that I didn't make myself, then I'm not going to talk about how other people who tasted the baked goods I've made. I'm not gonna necessarily mention that. I feel like I have a pretty good handle on how these are turning out, especially with these last 3 recipes, because I know what a biscuit's supposed to taste like and what the texture is supposed to be. Same with a muffin, same with a cupcake. And in all 3 instances here, look at that. It turned out really nicely. I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. And this was, more importantly, this is the recipe where I really feel like I made the most progress on my time. I said in the first video, I'm not going to stress about time. I'm not going to make that a make or break, and I'm not going to rush. Like the time management and the speed will come with practice. And 6 bakes in, I'm already seeing that manifest, and that's the real takeaway. Or as I like to say here, bake away. So today's bake away is I'm getting faster.